Well, here we are on day 5 of the fast, and I'm excited to continue our 21-day journey together. And on this day, I'm reminded that in the Bible, the number 5 is symbolic for God's grace and goodness. And I'm praying today on day 5 that His goodness and His grace will meet you again as you continue to fast and pray. As we've started this 21-day journey, we've been working our way through Psalm 119. And we've said every day that fasting is for feasting. It's a time to feast on God's Word. And in this first week, we've been looking at the many synonyms used for God's Word in Psalm 119 and then drawing an application for our lives. And we're going to continue to do the same today. So let's turn to Psalm 119 and read through verses 41 through 48. May your unfailing love come to me, Lord, your salvation according to your promise. Then I can answer anyone who taunts me, for I trust in your word. Never take your word of truth from my mouth, for I have put my hope in your laws. I will always obey your law forever and ever. I will walk about in freedom, for I have sought out your precepts. I will speak of your statutes before kings, and I will not be put to shame, for I delight in your commands because I love them. I reach out for your commands, which I love, that I may meditate on your decrees. Now again, there is so much packed into these passages, and in our short time together, we're only going to focus on one aspect. But I want to encourage you, even after we're done each day, to go back and read through it again and reflect on what the Lord is saying to you through His Word. But today I want to zero in on verse 45. It says, I will walk about in freedom, for I have sought out your precepts. So it's here we find another term that is synonymous for God's Word. It's God's Word as precepts. And in the Hebrew, that's the word pikudim. And this term is drawn from the sphere of someone who looks closely into a matter. In other words, precepts points to the fine print or detailed instructions of the Lord. Now, when we think of fine print, we generally think of ways in which companies and advertisers try to take from us. Just a few years back, I read that 22,000 people who signed up for free public Wi-Fi inadvertently agreed to 1,000 hours of community service, including cleaning toilets and relieving sewer blockages. That's an example of being taken advantage of through the fine print. But I want you to look at what the psalmist says. He says, I will walk about in freedom, for I have sought out your precepts. In other words, the instructions of the Lord are not given to try to take from us or to enslave us, but actually to set us free. Now, some might say, how in the world would living according to God's every word be liberating? Wouldn't living under someone else's authority inhibit my freedom? Well, let me share with you an illustration that has always stuck with me and one I've shared with our church before. Let's pretend that 2 people go up in a plane with the plan to skydive and experience the thrill of free falling. But when the 2 go to jump, there's one big difference. One decides to jump with the added weight of a parachute attached to their back. So we're talking about 30 extra pounds on their back. So you got some added weight strapped to your back. But the other person decides they want to be totally free and experience what it really feels like to free fall. Let me ask you, which person is the most free? The one without the parachute might look freer, probably feels freer since they don't feel the added weight and constraints of the parachute straps, but it's a false sense of freedom. Why? Because the reality is that the one without the parachute is enslaved to the force of gravity, might feel free, but sooner or later they will experience the consequences of that freedom. And what's sad is that's the way many today think of freedom. No constraints, no rules, no authority. I want to do what I want to do. I don't want anything to inhibit my freedom. But here's the reality. Just like in that parachute illustration, true freedom is one that takes into account the realities that God has set forth in His Word and seeks to live by them. The instructions set forth in God's Word weren't given because He wants to inhibit our freedom. They were given to create it. They were given because just like there are physical laws written into our universe, there are also spiritual laws at work. And if you choose to ignore them, just like gravity, you will experience the consequences. God's instructions are not only life, but they are liberating. And we will be blessed when we choose to live by them. So here's a question to reflect on today. Are you allowing God's word to instruct you on how to live? I want to encourage you to take some time with the Lord today and reflect on whether there's any place in your life where you are struggling to follow the Lord's instruction. Write down what comes to mind and surrender again to the authority of God and His Word. Know I'm praying for you today, and I'll see you back tomorrow.